Good morning, Big Rapids. This is Big Rapids Buzz. I'm Chris Long, and
This morning, I'm Bruce Borkovich. I'll be Bruce Borkovich for this entire show, Chris.
oh, really?
Yes.
Well-
I'm not goofing around today. This is serious business.
We have someone special today.
We certainly do. We have a friend. I'll start with that. A colleague and someone who I greatly admire and respect. We have Sheriff Brian Miller with us. Brian, welcome.
Morning. How are you?
You know what? I couldn't be any better. It's Monday morning. I've got Chris here. I've got you here. Couldn't be any better.
Great.
And Brian, just for the listeners, tell us a little bit about your career.
About my career. Well, I started at the Big Rapids Department of Public Safety, worked there 25 years, 3 years on the road, a year on the drug team, 7 years as a school resource officer. And then my last 14 years, kind of what I got into law enforcement to do, was a detective there. Opportunity came to run for sheriff. I always, say it's kind of corny, but I wanted to make a difference. I saw the sheriff's office as a place that had a lot of potential, just needed some, needed to be grounded and needed to be molded to be a professional law enforcement agency and one that our community could be proud of. So almost 3.5 years in, and we're going strong.
Yeah.
Does it feel like 3 years? I feel like you just got in there.
Yeah, time flies. Time flies. I thought it was going to be like a 3 or 4 year process to get the agency where I want it to be. But I think it's going to be more like 7 or 8. And my goal's 3 terms. I'll get to that 11th year if I have the opportunity and look and see where I'm at. If I still have a passion for it, we'll keep at it. But if I don't have a passion, I'll step away. That'll give me 37 years in law enforcement. I'll be 61, 62. My 10-year-old son will be out of the house one way or the other.
And you and your wife can just sit and
yes.
stare at each other all day.
Well, I'll find something else. I got a little ADD, so I'll find something else to
Just
do.
trust me, if grandkids come in there, you're going to have plenty.
Well,
to do.
you've told me plenty of stories.
I have. It's
yes,
it's,
you've told me plenty of stories, and I'll be honest. I'm hoping in 8-9 years.
yeah, not.
I'm
before.
not quite there yet because I got a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So
I'd recommend not before.
But if they're there, then I'll love them to death.
Yes, you will. I've always really admired the position of the sheriff. I've worked for the state. Then I worked as a contract employee for Bayonet for the state police drug team. And then I worked for Ferris. I've been deputized in 2 counties. But I've always really admired that position of the sheriff because it's really, there's a couple exceptions nationwide where there's a rare instance where a city chief is elected, but almost exclusively you're elected by the people. And that's the only way you answer to your job. There's no politicians. There's no people in any other area of power. If people don't like what they're doing, then they unelect you.
Right.
And that's just something that's so special in our, in our style of law enforcement in this country. It's a neat dynamic.
I like to tell people I'm not a politician. It may be a political position, but I'm not a politician. I'm a cop. I'm still a cop, and that's the way I'm going to be. I'm there for the people.
Yep.
I always have been,
Yes.
and
Yep.
that's not going to stop. And
Do you remember?
I don't always take direction well. I will say that.
Well, do you remember the lecture I gave you when you got elected? I told Brian, and I have so much respect for him as a police officer. I said, Brian, you're an action junkie. I know you. That's never going to go away. But remember, the citizens don't need another cop now. They need a sheriff and a leader and an administrator. And you gave me that look like someone just punched me in the gut.
Right. Well,
But I admire you so much that I felt that was important because Marty Trombley, rest his soul, the former chief, he had the same conversation with me when I got the Ferris job.
Right.
I said, Bruce, you're not a cop anymore. He said, I know you still are technically, but you're not a cop anymore. So
I still every once in a while got to get out of the
I know.
office.
I did too.
Or I kind of.
you know me at Ferris, right?
Right.
I'm sure my guys were complaining all over the place. Oh, he showed up again to this or
No.
that. But
No, or you showed up at an active, shooter,
Yeah.
hostage situation
Yeah.
in Rogers Heights, and
Yeah.
to this day, I can tell you, how much the deputies that were there appreciated it.
Yeah, I wasn't there to meddle.
No.
The command staff couldn't get there quickly. I was there, so there was a command officer in case anyone needed any advice. I ended up getting hamburgers and coffee and doing what the guys needed to have done. But
Casey Nemeth still talks
yep,
about that.
Yep. So Brian, here's why we're here tonight. We're not here to talk about how wonderful you are. Everyone knows that.
No.
A couple of weeks ago, we had on a Grand Rapids police officer and a social worker, and they have a special unit that they put together that respond to the homeless and people kind of on the street level with mental health issues. And we want to bring that here and have a conversation in this county and in our city because we do have, we have conflicts here. We have a growing homeless population, and we have interactions between them and citizens, business, in any combination. And they're not always good. They're not always positive, and it creates issues. What have you seen in your career in Big Rapids regarding, and I'm kind of lumping homeless together with people on the street with mental health issues who doesn't necessarily mean they're homeless. Many times they are, but what has been your history?
Well, going back, every community you go to has a little homeless population. It doesn't matter. I mean, you go back through the years, and we had a little bit of a homeless population, but they were guys that we all knew.
Right.
I mean, there were guys that, came up through town, and I can remember one, he'd get close to the winter months and he'd make sure he got himself in trouble. So then he'd go to the jail and he turned into the best trustee they had there.
It's true.
And then he'd get out and go right back into the summer and kind of, go couch surfing, or if he's sleeping different places. And then winter'd come, and then he'd get himself in trouble again and go back into the jail and turn into the trustee. But coming up, we always had those people, and I could, name them, but I won't.
Right.
There was about, handful of them that we always dealt with. And then things, kind of changed. And
When I moved here, it was, I don't remember seeing any of this stuff. It was very small, very, very small, maybe one or two, if that, when I moved up here in 2016. Something's changed between 2016 and now, and it's exploded in the sense that there's a lot more.
And again, I know I've gotten some flack in the past. I wrote an editorial speaking about the homeless population and whatever relationship OBK, our Brothers Keeper, had with it. I can tell you, our Brothers Keeper, when they opened, a lot of the people that they were supporting or that were staying there were all locals.
Right.
Yeah.
They were locals, and somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure where, last 4 or 5 years, I can tell you, it's changed. And it's changed. And what you got is you got people moving in, and from my understanding, either they're not able to follow the rules at OBK, or they're kicked out, and then they're left to fend on the streets. And then they continue to kind of be a problem. I'll, use an example, although these two people, from my understanding, were at OVK, is the city today arrested a couple of OVK that a few weeks ago broke a camera at a local business, a surveillance camera, broke it, and the city had to go, pick them up today. Again, OBK, there's a place for a homeless shelter. I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
People need shelter. People need to be supported. Everybody at some point or another hits ground zero.
Yeah.
And not everybody, but people do in their lives.
Yes, they do.
And they need that support. So there's a place for homeless shelter. I truly believe that. I'm a big person. Let's take care of our own before we start taking care of others.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the Christian way, but we had enough. I want to say, I didn't think we had a huge problem, but there was, the homeless sometimes created some problems. And I think in today's day and age, you talk about mental health. I think mental health has as big of a problem with the homeless homeless population as anything.
They do.
And then you add controlled substances and the abuse and or addiction to them to the mix. And I think that's really what is leading to what we're seeing today in our community.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, you mentioned the dynamic that if people can't follow the rules at OBK, they're kicked out or on the street. It's almost the same dynamic of what happened back in the 70s when the concept of mainstreaming came in. So very well-intentioned people said, listen, we feel it's cruel, it's inhuman to institutionalize, to state institutionalize people with mental health problems. Many times they were homeless, mental health, addiction, etc. And so the plan was this is cruel and inhuman. We need to set them free, basically.
Right.
And then they went from a place of shelter, care, medical attention, food, etc., basically out on the streets, for the most part, probably because of mental health issues, can't function and hold jobs and be responsible. And so well-intentioned people kind of set them to the wolves. And the analogy I make is on their very worst day of their life, whether it's a week from being out or 10 years later, due to despair and addiction and whatever, on the very worst day of their life, when someone calls in, who responds? It's not a politician, it's not a social worker, a psychologist, or anyone else. It's a cop.
Right.
And when they're dealing with someone in the worst day of their lives with addiction and mental health problems, they make split-second decisions that then attorneys and politicians can pick apart. You know, hindsight's 20/20. Boy, you can see real clearly 6, 8, 10 months, 2 years later, and pick the cop's decision apart. And it's kind of the same dynamic. If they can't follow the rules at OBK, they're out on the street, and now many times they're causing issues. They're causing problems.
Well, the privatization of our mental health system, when they changed that the last 40 years or so.
Reagan administration, I think.
That really, I think, is when things kind of blew up. And it's only gotten worse, and it's going to continue to get worse. Unfortunately, I'm an optimist, but I also am a realist, and I think it's going to continue to get worse before it gets better. So and police officers nowadays, we're as much social workers as we are cops. I mean, you talk to a law enforcement officer today compared to a law enforcement officer 30 years ago, and it's night and day.
Absolutely.
Even I have a lot more compassion. Not that law enforcement officers don't, they do, but I have a lot more compassion for individuals in this situation than maybe some law enforcement. But you go back 40 years ago, and it's so we're training our law enforcement, all of our first responders locally on mental health first aid. Actually, we have some training February 28th that we're sending a couple of our deputies to. It was a grant that we received through MMRMA that we in Osceola County intended to educate every first responder in the 2 counties in mental health first aid over the next couple of years.
Yeah. When I was at Ferris, we had a psychiatrist from the state police come and put on a great training. Emily Bongard, everyone loves Emily. She's so good to work with here. Has done a lot for Ferris, and the training is incredible. Listen, when you went 30, 40 years ago, Brian, you get a call, someone's out barking at the moon outside your business. You know, you show up, tell them to leave. They give you 1 minute's trouble. They're on the ground in handcuffs and they're in jail. And then we realize jail isn't a place, especially for addiction and mental health, especially mental health issues. That's not where they need to go. It's not going to help.
Well, and it doesn't help. And then what's happened is the jails have gotten overpopulated with the people suffering from mental health. We're actually fortunate where we have a gentleman that works through community mental health that is in our jail 3 days a week. John Erler is in our jail 3 days a week. He's in Osceola County 2 days a week. He's a godsend.
Yeah.
It's been a godsend for us, and he's just as part of our staff as anybody.
Yeah. And he's a risk manager for you. Listen, your corrections folks who they have such a hard job, and they do such a great job. They're not trained, social workers and psychiatrists. And if he's in there helping to mitigate some of those issues and put some of those fires out, that makes it, for you as a sheriff, that's a risk,
All right.
risk management thing that you're lowering liability there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he just is so helpful. He has sessions that he sets up with all the inmates, and then we'll sit down with them individually too, and work through some things. So I mean, we're working towards that, but it goes back to like in the field. Law enforcement today, like I said, needs to be able. Communication is so huge. De-escalation, being able to talk people down, and you have to treat every individual differently. You can't go and treat everybody the same.
It's true. You treat them all with respect.
Correct.
But everyone based on a cop is got 1,000 feelers out in the first contact, and you're reading body language and clothing and how people are standing and acting and circumstances and the time of day or night and the environment, and that's all happening, in milliseconds.
Right.
And you have to adjust how you're dealing with people based on all of those bits and pieces of
their
feedback.
their body language,
Absolutely.
Mannerisms. Our friend Pat Curry always will joke with me that whenever I'm talking to him, I'm always scanning, and I'm always looking around. I mean, it's just
I still do it, Brian. I've been out over 3 years, and I still do.
You're always scanning. You're always looking at your environment, who's there, what they're doing, the people you're talking to's body language. You're still keeping eye contact, but you're looking around, and you get in the field, and you need to be able to do that. With individuals, specifically those suffering from some mental health deficiencies.
Yeah, no doubt. We are talking with Sheriff Brian Miller. We're going to take some deeper dives into this concept of the homeless population and / mental health issues. But first, I need to let everyone know that you're listening to WBZX Big Rapids on B1039. How'd I do, Chris?
I think you did good, but I think it's time to talk to our sponsors.
You're right, Chris. Well, we're here this morning with Sheriff Brian Miller, and we're talking about our local homelessness / mental health problem, and it's real. It's increasing. Brian, you had mentioned that it's anecdotal. You haven't done research, but you have mentioned that it seems to be a much, much higher percentage of these folks that are not from Mecosta County. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, just recently, actually, so at the beginning of every month, I do a call for service or complaints that we take that are of significant nature in traffic stops we take in each of the townships. And so it gives me a chance to review a report, see what deputies are doing and keeping on top. It goes back to my detective days. So I do that every month. It usually takes 3 days. So I was reviewing reports, and then I saw that there was in the gas station on Northland and 11 Mile, they trespassed a guy for stealing alcohol. And then I see a few days later that they trespassed the same guy from the gas station on 215th and Perry for doing the same thing. And so it just so happens a day or two later, I dropped my son off at a gym to work out, my 10-year-old, and was walking out, and some guy walks up to me and says, "Hey, could you help me? My dad died, and I came here from Alaska, and while I was here, my car broke down, and I was really looking for some money." And then he pulls out his license and shows me. I go, recognize the name as the guy that had gotten trespassed.
Oh, wow.
So I say, well, tell you what, so-and-so, I see that you were trespassed from one place for stealing alcohol, that you got trespassed from another place for alcohol. Right now, I don't have the time for you. And
Did he know who you were, Brian?
Didn't know who I was, but I think when I called him, by name and mentioned those two things, he looked at me like, "Oh my!"
Yeah.
And I just said, "Thank you." And
any guess what is the nexus between Alaska and Big Rapids, Michigan?
Not a clue.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is I'm wondering, I've heard that on the web that we've kind of become a destination of sorts
That
for
was
those that are in need or in a desperate place.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're seeing, and that's why, and I know that law enforcement from surrounding jurisdictions have dropped people off locally and then left.
Wow.
And so I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's the basis for the problem that we're having.
Now, I have been called a liar by the other side when I said that the homeless problem is not just it's not just local people here anymore. They're people from other states, other parts of the state, far away. It's no longer just the people that we've grown up with or whatnot and known in this area. There's people outsiders, not just one either. It's not just the person from Alaska. There's others. But I'm so glad that you said that, because they have tried to convince everyone, oh, no, it's only Mecosta County. These people here are only Mecosta County or surrounding Osceola and things like that.
Well, in the past, like I said, that we had a homeless population, but they weren't even from outside. They were Big Rapids people.
The city.
They were city people.
Yeah.
And now, sure, you get some people from, surrounding areas, but there's a large group that aren't from our area at all.
Right.
And
we're going to
that's where you have problems because, if they are tending to be a problem, you can identify it and you can deal with them.
Yeah.
So the people that are causing the most problems, is there a pattern that it's majority the outside of Mecosta, or is it just no pattern at all?
No, I don't think so. I think it goes both ways. It just adds, compounds whatever problem that you have, having these, people from outside the area. Yeah. I know one of these people came actually today. I went to a business to do something this morning while taking my kid to school, and I got approached by one of these homeless people that knows me because I dealt with him back when I was a detective, from outside the area, but has been in the area and wasn't homeless, but is now homeless and sleeping outside this business. Asked for money for a bus to North Carolina to stay with his brother.
And I'm sure you'd agree with me, Brian, and the professionals will substantiate this. The majority of the time when someone is begging for money, the reality is the vast majority of the time they're going to spend it on alcohol and drugs or both.
Feed the addiction.
Well, I listened to Tony and Christy with your episode a couple weeks ago, and I would tend to agree. Let me buy you something. Let me get you something.
Yep.
To help you.
Yeah. Because
I'll give you goods.
Yes. Yeah. We're both. We're not cold-hearted. We're compassionate.
No, not at all.
We're both. You and I are both Christians. Neither one of us are ashamed to say that. And a real quick story, and then I think you have a story. When I was the chief at Ferris, we had a call from our admissions building that there was a suspicious male hanging around there, and now he's interacting and not threatening anyone, but just didn't seem to be right. So, of course, uniform guy gets dispatched. Of course, I've got to go.
Right.
But Tim Jacobs, our detective, went with me, and we encounter this guy, and we're talking to him, and he's in his early 20s. He makes the hair stand up in the back of my neck. I can't. Another cop knows what I'm talking about. Right. Maybe the layman doesn't, but I have instincts about him. Sixth sense. And we're asking why he's there. Turned out he had a fishing rod with him. It turned out to be stolen. But anyhow, while we're dealing with him, and then I was kind of getting my fill, and he was there we found out, to enroll in Ferris. And I'm looking at him, and it appeared to be that he was probably living outside. His clothes were disheveled. He was very unkempt. He was his hygiene was poor. And I start asking him, he's talking about going to college here at Ferris and enrolling, and their admissions people are so good-hearted, and they're thinking the best of everyone, so they're kind of playing into it. Oh yeah, we'll get you enrolled. That's great. And I said, did you graduate high school? No. He was in his early 20s. GED? No. And finally, I guess I'd had enough, and I said, listen, do you really think there's any chance of you being accepted at a college? And then he got real testy with me, doubled up a fist. He was half my size, doubled up a fist, got real agitated. And so now we're going to push this a little further. And we start checking into him. He's 22 or 23. He's already spent 5 years in prison for armed robbery. He's from Indiana. Oh. Now, was I a gentle, feel good, sensitive cop on a campus at first? But guess what? My job was to protect every person in campus, visitors, staff, and students, and that's what came first. And he was a person that shouldn't be there. He's a threat. And so this is a classic example of not only someone from
outside
the area, but that this had a serious criminal history. And you had mentioned you had some kind of story about someone who showed up somewhere.
Well, we talk about mental health and substance abuse. They don't always go hand in hand. I
Right.
want to make that clear. But there are occasions when it did. And so there was a young man that during my career I had arrested several times. And but I always had a good rapport with him. I always treated him with respect. And, always made sure that I treated him the way he deserved to be treated. So this is summer of 20. I get a call from him on a Friday afternoon that says, I need help. I'm hearing voices. One of them is yours. I know you have a chip in my head to know what I'm doing. And so right away, knowing him, I knew he was suffering from some meth psychosis, but also was concerned about some other mental health issues. So I said, hey, listen, can I get you in to see somebody at 1016 rehab? Can I get you, if I call, can I get you in to see that? And he's like, well, yeah. So Monday morning, I called 1016.
What's 1016?
It's a rehabilitation, social, some social work, and
it's public funded.
It's
right?
public
Yes.
funding. So I called somebody I knew there, and they said, yeah, we'll get him in, have him come in, Tuesday morning. I don't remember what it was. And so I called him back and say, hey, I got you in Tuesday morning, go show up. Well, he didn't. And then, it takes a lot of strength at that point when you're near that point and you don't have the wherewithal to, you need some support.
Yeah.
But so anyways, a few days later, maybe that next week, I remember it was the very first day of school for my sons. And I was I still was at the city, and I got done working out at the gym at the city and headed home, was getting my kids up, getting around for their first day of school. And I get a call from one of the city officers that says, hey, watch your back. So-and-so just showed up at our office with a club looking for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
And I lived in the city at the time. And a lot of people knew where I lived. It is who I am.
Yeah,
I'm not going to hide from people.
Yep.
So I don't tell my wife or kids. I get the kids up. I tell them, all right, make sure you got a marked unit outside my house. We'll come out to the car. I'll get the kids to school, but I want a marked unit there just in case. So they come out. The kids see the police officer. My wife, because it's first day of school, they're like, what's the police officer? Oh, they're just, I wave at them, and we get the kids to school. Never said anything to my wife or kids. Probably should have, but get them to school. So then a day or two later, I had worked over in Barreton PD that night. The next morning, my wife calls and says, hey, some guy just showed up at our door last night. And Cameron, my older son, she goes, he answered the door. I'm like, well, shoot. So I call the school, get the secretary on the phone, send her a picture of this person who I thought it was, and say, show that to Cameron and see if that's him. And sure enough,
Oh my
Cameron's
gosh.
like, yep, that was him. And he showed up at the house looking. that's where we drew lines. And he showed up at the office, actually, at the city police to see me. Myself and one of my co-workers at the time called him into the interview room, and we had a sit down trying to get him help. He wouldn't take it, come back again. Finally, we got him hospitalized, but they couldn't find a bed for him at a mental health facility. So he got up and walked out of the hospital, went over the Maple Street Bridge, and was going to, you came out that day, actually.
Yeah.
And was going to jump off the bridge. I mean, he was over the bridge. I talked him back over. And then
I remember this story.
Yeah,
I remember hearing it. You're the one who talked him out?
Oh,
Bruce?
I talked him over. I talked him off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian did. I just came.
Yeah, he was there, though. He showed up because that's what we do.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
So I talked him off the bridge, got him, and kind of had his attention to me. And then one of the city guys kind of took him to the ground, and we got him hospitalized. Now, he had got out and he's been back in jail a couple times since, in jail for different things. About a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I was down in Kalamazoo for my younger son's hockey, and I got a message from him calling me. When I called back, it was his mother who said that he's kind of fallen off again and having some mental health problems, and they were living outside the area. So I sat and talked to her for 5, 10, 20 minutes and just tried to talk her through, and hopefully I haven't spoken to her since, but hopefully they've gotten him some help.
Yeah. A real quick public service announcement, because I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were home alone. It was a woman, and she knocked on the door late at night. She answered the door. People make this mistake so often. So for the audience, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, child, you have no obligation to answer your door.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a good talk with my son after that.
Yes, and people don't think of it. And so here's what I recommend. If you're home alone and you're not expecting someone and you're not comfortable, number one, do not answer the door. Come out from where you're at and turn a light on, an interior light or a outside light if you can, and do not answer that door, because many times thieves, and Brian was a detective forever, they will come and knock on your door, and they're trying to find a house where no one answers. No one's home. Now I can break in. And if you do answer, it's like, does Johnny Smith live here? No. Oh, I thought this was Johnny's house. Must be somewhere else, and they leave. And that's very common. So safety warning here for people. No obligation to answer your door. Do not answer your door, but you do want them to know someone's home. And so come out. Turn a noticeable light on, whether it's inside of the house or outside, and they're probably going to leave and you're good to go.
Right.
Because a lot of people my wife has done it even. She's answered the door at night. Why did you do that? Well, someone's not, she really doesn't have a great answer.
Or the Ring doorbell nowadays is a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Having something like that.
Yep. Well, we've been talking this morning to Sheriff Brian Miller, a person I regard as a friend and a colleague. And Brian, your first term here has been outstanding. You are a wonderful representative of public service to this community. We're so lucky to have a sheriff like you.
You've done great.
I wish you every luck in this upcoming election. You've got 1,000% support from me, but for the community, this is a pretty special guy who's got a big heart and a big brain and a lot of experience.
When does the petitions need to be in by?
It's in April sometime. I know I've gone out and gotten mine. April 24th. I know I got to go out and get mine.
Where are some of the locations you can tell our listeners where they can sign the petition?
You go to Curry's, and Pat Curry, he'll shove it in your face.
He will.
I wanted you to say it because that's where I signed.
Well, I know when I first thought about running for sheriff, when I first filed, I just paid the $100 because I wanted to be in charge of when I came out. I didn't want people talking.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to make sure I had my ducks in a row.
Yeah.
I knew where I was and what I needed to do, and then bam, here we are.
Yeah.
Things are different, and now I don't mind people talking a little bit, as long as it's good.
Oh,
If you
no,
wanna
it's
talk
all
bad,
good.
You know
It's
what?
all good.
I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about you.
Everyone likes Brian.
Yes.
Not everybody, but
I don't know anybody.
So, but if everybody does like you, then you got a problem.
That is also true.
Everyone it's far better to be respected than liked.
Yeah.
Right.
And people like and respect you. So, Well, Brian, we appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
This won't be the last time we have you on the BR Buzz, and you'll come back sometime, I hope.
I
Oh,
heard
of
that you
course.
have another show.
Well, we have a show that Pat Curry got a hold of me about wanting to do some sports talk, and so on Wednesday mornings we've begun doing that. A couple weeks ago, we had Brennan Walsh, varsity coach at Reed City, and Jason Kostecki, JV basketball coach at Big Rapids on. Yesterday morning, we had Brad Ancliffe, former Chip Hills baseball star, Central Michigan baseball star, and Hall of Fame coach. Coaches boys baseball, won the state title last year at Beale
Wow.
City.
Wow.
And Bob Raven, boys, girls basketball coach, varsity baseball at Morley Stanwood. So, and then next week, I think we have Brian Goodnow, varsity coach at Pine River, and Andrew Thompson, varsity girls coach at Crossroads, are going to be our guests.
When am I going to be on? You know, I used to be a coach, don't you?
We'll have you on.
Did you know that?
No.
I
Well,
coached for 4 years in Everett when I was
well,
teaching.
I'm kind of trying to look for somebody in Everett.
My last year, of course, Brian, this was a couple of years. This was in 1985. But let's see, I coached 7th grade girls basketball in the fall, varsity boys basketball in the winter, and JV boys baseball in the spring.
Wow.
They were desperate.
Well, and at the end of the year, you were worn out, right?
I was tired.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't care how young
yeah,
you are at
yeah,
that time. That's a lot.
But I love the kids.
What's the name of the show and when is it running?
What is it? Bob had a name for it. Bob kind of came up with the name. Oh, hot stove.
How did that
Pat
come
Curry's
about?
that's Bob's. Bob Aldrich came up with it. Hot stove. Or Pat Curry's hot stove talk show, and yeah, it's going well.
What
Wednesday
time?
mornings at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Wednesday
mornings at
Brian
10
and
a.m.
Pat.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah. Well, Pat took the lead a lot this week.
That's all right.
Yeah,
He'll do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It was good. Brad and Bob are awesome, and you know, I'm looking forward. And I'm already trying to line up a couple weeks
Yeah.
down the road. I'm going to reach out to Andy Bronkema,
Oh, yeah.
and Tessa Smith.
Tesfa.
I
One of
like-
my favorite humans.
Yep.
It's kind of good that he got to take the lead on the show, at least for once. 'Cause
It is.
Pete Kent kind of takes the lead on his show.
Yeah.
Yeah, once in a while.
So,
Well,
but
anyhow.
I think it's important that we talked off to go back to the homeless situation. I just want to make sure I'm clear. I don't blame OBK, and I don't think OBK is the
Oh,
problem.
Right. No.
Because I think
Yeah.
there's a very important place
Yes.
for a homeless shelter
Yes.
in our community. But the problem is the more broad it gets, the more.
Well, I can ask this question and insinuate this because I'm not in office. The question is, this is a question that doesn't need to be answered right now, but the question is, in a community like this, does the fact that a homeless shelter exists bring in homeless from other areas? And you don't need to answer that. That's a hot potato, but I can ask it because I'm kind of making a statement that it's very possible that, if folks find out a particular area has a homeless shelter, they're going to come from other areas. And Brian, I'm kind of like you. I say we take care of our own here first. So, well, we have to get going, or else Jen is going to make Chris and I sit in a corner, sit in a timeout chair, do something. You're listening to WBZX Big Rapids on B1039. And Chris, we need to talk about our sponsors. We got some great sponsors. The Pet Boutique, Paris Creek Jewelry. Hi, Corey. She must get sick of that. Purely Clean Services, the Barrington Firearms Training Center.
They're good.
They are good.
They are.
We had Casey on.
Yeah,
and
that was one of the
gonna-
best shows ever.
Yes.
I listened to that, and I thought that was one of the best shows.
He and I are going to do a
he's-
show, of course, Chris too, but we're going to talk more about personal protection and what happens if someone attacks you and what you can and can't do. We're going to go from here's my training class to real life stuff. Here's what you can and can't do.
We're fortunate to have him back at the office.
He's been really growing into that position. 911 Restoration, Gilbert's Carpet Plus Color Tile, Benton Baker of Big Rapids, and my friend Sue Bean at Big Rapids Realty, along with other supportive people and businesses from the community. We thank each and every one of you for getting behind our show. If you'd like to be a sponsor on our show, Big Rapids Buzz with Chris and Bruce, call your best friend Jen here at B1039 at 231-796-1103, and she'll get you started. Listen again next Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. for Big Rapids Buzz with me, Bruce Borkovich.
And Chris Long.
Big Rapids Buzz.